everybody this morning. So that's connecting, and that one is connecting as well. So Becky Lederer is in the studio with us. Becky, we appreciate you taking some time and coming in this morning, and welcome to the studio.
Thank you, Chris, for inviting me.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about you in general, and then we'll look at some of the ideas, because each candidate, you've got Jordan that we talked with just a couple of weeks ago. Beth is going to be in the studio here, I believe, next week or the following week. And each candidate has sort of their idea, but you all know each other. You've worked with each other. But before we talk about kind of that symmetry between the three of you, let's talk about who you are. As far as I know, you're from Branch, right? Okay.
That is correct.
All right. Defense attorney here in Mason County. Graduate of Mason County Eastern, and as well, you went to Spring Arbor College, right? Okay, Knights, is it Knights still?
It's actually Spring Arbor University.
Now, okay, all right.
Believe it or not.
Very cool. All right, things changed.
It switched in the middle of my time there.
All right, and also then graduate of Cooley Law School in Lansing. So let's, if you had to sort of write your biography, you know, that first paragraph right out of the gate, how would you describe yourself to the listeners and viewers today?
How would I describe myself? Ooh.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a very hard worker. I grew up, again, in Mason County. I grew up on a farm.
Okay.
And as a person who grew up in Mason County on a farm, obviously, you learn a certain work ethic. And so I have a very hardworking work ethic. And
come closer to that microphone so people can hear you closer.
Sure.
You know, you bring up a very important thing, is that we have a lot of rural community here, and crimes and misdemeanors, felonies, all of that doesn't just happen in bigger cities or bigger populations. And so, being from a rural community, do you understand that it's you have to focus on everybody, the whole population, I would assume. Is that right?
Absolutely, Chris. Again, I was born and raised in this community, and I've been practicing in this community for the last 17 years. And so we have a considerable amount of crime happening. We certainly have a considerable amount of drug problems in our community. And so, yeah, as the prosecuting attorney, you have to focus on everything as a whole.
Growing up, we have some similar characteristics there. I grew up in a very small town in northern Michigan, very rural community. And I always feel that there's certain things that you learn or are instilled in you when you have such a close-knit community. What do you think those characteristics are that you possess for the Mason County Prosecutor's position, growing up at going to MCE, growing up in the Branch area in here? What would you say?
Well, again, Chris, growing up in this community makes me understand this community probably more than any of the other candidates, because, again, I've grown up in this community. But can you ask your question again? I apologize, because I think I kind of diverted a little bit.
No, it's okay. You know, as mentioned, growing up in a small environment, small class environment in school. Cooley was probably a different story when you went to Lansing, but there's things that are instilled in you when you grow up in small communities. And what characteristics do you have?
So I think, again, the hardworking characteristic. Again, when you've grown up in a small community, in a small town, I started working, frankly, at age 13.
Okay.
And so in addition to doing farm chores and slinging hay.
So were you up at like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, or?
Not quite that early.
Right.
We only had a smaller farm, so not quite that early. But definitely that work ethic has always been instilled in me. And I think also coming from a small community, things were not just handed to my family, if that makes any sense. We are first generation college graduates. So even just achieving where I am and achieving a law degree at this point in my life didn't come easy. And so I think that is a characteristic that I have, in that just the drive, if that makes any sense,
Absolutely.
to achieve, and the drive to work hard.
Okay. You went on to Cooley in Lansing. Same sort of idea. What happened there to make you want to come back to the area? 17 years, right here in the area. Tell us about law school. Tell us about returning back to the area, if you don't mind.
Sure. I completed law school in, the required 3 years. And it was always my desire to come back here because, again, this is home to me. I came back, and I did, even before I graduated, or passed the bar, I did an internship with Judge Snagowski. And so, again, I did an internship with Bob Andrews and Roger Anderson. And so my intention always was to come back home and serve my community.
All right.
There never was a question in my mind as to where I would end up.
Okay. I've asked this question of the previous candidate, and it's pretty open-ended, and you can kind of take it wherever you would like to take it. But why do you want to be the Mason County Prosecutor? What drives you to fill this position?
Well, again, this is home for me. I have 2 children that I'm raising here in Mason County, and I am extremely invested in this community. My family, the majority of my family lives here. And so I am extremely invested in making sure that we have a safe community, safe for my children, in addition to everyone else's children. And so that's part of the reason that I want to be Mason County Prosecutor. Okay.
Let's dive into a few more of those elements this morning. And if you're just joining us, we're talking with Becky Lederer. Becky vying for the Mason County Prosecutor's position. Lauren Kreinbrink, she's decided not to run for that seat this November. There's 3 candidates. We talked to Jordan. We're going to be talking with Beth. But Becky is in the studio this morning with us. Becky, we talk throughout the country about the crime levels. And do you mind defining, in your opinion, and you've been doing this for 17 years, so you probably have a good track record of this, but between 17 years ago and now, has the crime changed here in the area? And I'm not necessarily talking about statistics. I'm talking about, the actual offenses. Has it changed? And we talk about drugs in many cases. But what is reality? What is happening in Mason County that you can observe that's happening real time right now that you need to figure out how to clean up?
Sure. So, again, I think we've always had a drug problem. The drug just seems to change over time as to what the drug is, frankly. Okay. We went through meth for a while. Now it seems to be back to fentanyl, cocaine, heroin. I do the majority of the arraignments as the defense attorney for the arraignment. So I see what the charges are essentially on a regular basis. And again, even frankly, I don't think that the crime level has necessarily changed. It's just the drug that may change over time and kind of ebb and flow.
Do you think that the community understands? I guess my question, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but does the community understand that we do have an extreme level of issues here? Is that something that the everyday citizen understands?
I am not sure, honestly. Obviously, I am more acutely aware of it because I am faced with it on a very daily basis. Yeah. And so as to whether or not the public at large is aware of that, I am unsure.
Okay. Let's talk about, and that's fine. Let's talk about how you are going to be. I mean, you're going to be running for this office for the next few months here. How are you going to connect with the community so you can convince them that you are the right candidate? What's that next few months look like for you?
Well, the next few months, I have already charted out a calendar, and it looks very busy in regards to attending functions and things. That said, again, I'm also very connected in this community, and I'm already doing a lot of those things anyways, because this is home for me.
Well, I asked this question to the previous candidate that was in the studio, and we're in a very political climate, right? Very polarized out there, but we find that the conversation tends to lean back to how strict we are with different sentencing that happens, bonds that are put out there, the amount or the level of it. How do you address that this morning? What's your feelings on that? What's your opinions when it comes to, is it a slap? Because we hear this, a slap on the wrist, didn't get enough time, or or that bond was too easy. They're out of jail, and we hear this extreme of extremes in major cities, like the police officer in New York that just got killed by somebody that was released from jail there. We wouldn't want that to happen here in Mason County, but I would assume you have opinions on that, and the community is going to want to know what your thoughts on there. Can you share a little bit of that with us this morning?
Sure. That's kind of a complicated answer because what the public may not be aware of is that there is actually, again, rules that the magistrate has to follow when making and setting a bond. And so it's the magistrate that decides the bond, and certainly the prosecutor can argue for or against the bond, but there's also many factors that go into bond, and the factors are important as to whether or not a bond is set at a personal recognizance bond or a high monetary bond. And some of those factors are safety to the public. I'm just trying to roll through all of the factors in my head that are in the court rule or statute. Safety to the public, reasonable likelihood to appear for court.
Okay, absolutely.
So there are many factors that kind of go into it. The presumption is that a person should get a personal recognizance bond. And so that's what the magistrate is working against, or the prosecutor essentially is working against, is a presumption that there's going to be a personal recognizance bond. And so it's weighing all of these factors to determine what sort of bond to set.
What do you think, every candidate kind of wants to change something or keep for certain things and sometimes completely reverse others. Is there anything in your mind that really stands out that, and we'll take it both sides if you don't mind. First, something that the prosecutor's office here in Mason County doing well. You're very proud that this is part of the community here. And on the flip side, not necessarily from a negative standpoint, but from more of a what would you like to see that you would do in that seat if you were the Mason County prosecutor? Would you take both angles for us this morning?
I would like to say what I would do is communicate. I think communication is super important, whether that be with the public, with the law enforcement officers, whether it be with the defense attorneys. So that is something that I feel that I would ensure would happen, is communication with everyone. And I would also note that communication with the public gets a little bit complicated because we do have, as the prosecutor, there is a ethical consideration in addition to ensuring that a defendant has a right to have a jury trial free from influence of media. So a prosecutor can essentially try their case through the media and reveal a bunch of facts prior to a defendant's jury trial. So while communication is super important, it's also a very delicate dance, essentially, for a prosecutor. And I think that is something that I am capable of trying to delicately do that dance and ensure that victims' rights are ensured in addition to the defendant's rights, but yet the public is informed.
Because you see on social media something's posted and people are polarized, right? They're one way or another. The majority is, sometimes, it shouldn't be a slap on the wrist, as I mentioned earlier. So this position, you have to have some tough skin, don't you, in regards to that, compared to where you started years ago, I would assume.
Absolutely. I am going to have some tough skin, and it is going to be a learning experience if I am elected prosecutor to have tough skin. I certainly have gotten a lot tougher skin over the last 17 years as a criminal defense attorney here in Mason County. But it absolutely, I'm going to have tough skin.
You're going from the defense to the prosecution. Can you confidently convince people that, because that's switching sides.
It is.
And so how do you convince people? And what's your thoughts on that you're the right candidate after defending criminals for 17 years? What's your thoughts?
Other prosecutors have done it in the past. Paul Spagnuolo was the defense attorney first. And so this isn't an abnormal kind of switch. And frankly, the skills set are essentially the same. As long as you can capably do trials, switching sides really, frankly, doesn't matter.
Okay. Does it give you more insight? And if it does, in what way?
Absolutely. It gives me more insight, because if I am looking at a police report as having been a defense attorney previously, I am going to be looking at that police report, and if there are any deficiencies or concerns that are in the case, I'm going to be able to identify and spot those right away, whereas somebody without having that defense experience may not be able to identify those. And if I can identify those right away and communicate to law enforcement to be able to either fix the issue or communicate to the law enforcement to educate them for future, to ensure that we don't have that same issue going forward. And
we heard similar from Jordan in regards to that topic when we chatted with him. I would assume Beth will probably be similar thought process in regards to that. Before we wrap up, and if you're just joining us, Becky Lederer here this morning. Becky, I asked this question of Jordan. I'm going to ask it of you. I'll ask it of Beth as well. Is the three of you can't be elected altogether. That doesn't happen in our election process. But you have to stand out between the other two. And so I'd like to be able to, and all three of you have, I believe, expressed to our team that it's not meant to be a negative campaign. You don't want to, get down in the mud there, but you do want to be able to convince the population, the residents of Mason County that's going to be voting, that you are the right candidate. So I'd like you to be able to maybe do some comparison, if you don't mind, so that people can see some differences, because we're just on the edge of the campaign. And it only gets tougher as you go along, and people are going to want to know that. But what's your thoughts this morning?
Well, one thing I would like the public to know is that I understand in probably a more acute way than any other candidate could probably understand of the drug problem that we have in this community. And let me explain why. I've had 6 different foster children in and out of my home over a period of years. And when you have taken a newborn foster child out of DeVos, withdrawing from drugs, and the after effects of that lasting for 3 to 6 months, you're never the same as a person. You completely understand the drug problem and the effects that it has on innocent children. And so from that perspective, and having taken that, I completely understand this drug problem that we have in our community, and I'm committed to focusing on that. In addition to that, I think that there are things that we need to do in our community and court system, such as sobriety court, which are very successful in other counties. And so those are things that, as prosecutor, I would be willing to put extra time and effort into in order to make our community better and more successful.
All right. And I wouldn't do justice if I didn't ask you this, because I know a lot of the conversation we had today was focused on the drug issues that we have in the community. But can you identify maybe 2 more issues that you feel you have to start focusing on crime-wise here in Mason County that people understand that this is happening as well out there, other than the drug issues?
Sure. One of the major issues that again, being the arraignment attorney, I see and am doing the arraignments for a lot of the complaints and the criminal defendants that are coming through our system. And one of them is actually unbelievably, that is probably we get the most of, is driving while license suspended. And so that's a huge problem, and it's very difficult for people to get their driver's licenses back. And how to fix that problem, that certainly might be greater than the prosecutor in Mason County's position, if that makes any sense. But that certainly is one very prominent issue that we have in Mason County, and people are just trying to get to their jobs.
And a big part of that is affordability of fees and costs and such like that. But and then the third thing, the second thing that I asked of crime that you feel something needs to be addressed from your office if you take if you become Mason County Prosecutor.
A third additional thing that would need to be addressed.
Yeah, drugs and the driving while
drugs and driving while license suspended, I think, are the greatest. And then one of the other, again, focuses that I would be having as well is in regards to the sex trafficking that we have that's occurring. Yeah. And it's really scary, again, as the person who, is doing arraignments, it's really scary to see the things that are happening in our own community. And it's terrifying, and it's definitely something that is super important to me because, again, I have kids in this community. And
it's good to be able to relate to the individuals that are, going through the court system, that are affected as victims out there as well. And Becky, we as we talked with Jordan, we left the door open to invite you back as well. We'll do that. I know we had chatted a little bit about potentially a candidate forum to talk more as you progress through the campaign and get closer, because I think it's important. You see the comments when somebody is sentenced or arrested in that initial phase. Sometimes, as we talked with communication, and I asked this about with Jordan of how you would communicate more with the media to make sure that information is passed on to the media a little bit, just so that the community understands. And there is a fine line between, prosecuting somebody in the public opinion side of things versus being able to do your job. So very understanding there. But we would love to have you back on the air and with the other candidates. And as as I said with Jordan, I'll give you the last word of why you would want people to vote for you, if you would like to take that.
Sure. Well, I'm going to give you my campaign slogan.
Okay. Yeah, that's okay.
And that is integrity first and justice always. And why I would want people to vote for me is because that I have always lived my life with integrity. Again, I have always lived my life with a very, very strong moral compass. And that means that I live my life with integrity. And I also expect that, frankly, of others. And I expect the same from others. And so I would be seeking justice if I was elected prosecutor.
All right. Sounds fair. All right. Becky, we appreciate you coming in this morning. And I know you were a little nervous. Everybody's nervous when they come in the radio station, but you did great. So I appreciate you taking some time with us this morning.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It is 9:54 here on 102.7 Mom FM and Hot Country Hits.